What if I told you that a Black and Native American man invented the potato chip, one of America's most beloved snacks, but never saw a penny of the billions it generated? What if I told you that while corporations built empires off of his creation, George Crum died without the generational wealth that should have been for his family's legacy? This isn't just about a crispy snack. This is about how racism and systemic exclusion turned Black innovation into white profit and how it's still happening today. Now, before I tell you the story of George Crum and the fortune that should have been enjoyed by his descendants, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We're building a community of truth tellers who refuse to let these stories of lost Black wealth be forgotten. I did not learn about George Crum until last year. It was during the time my good friend Derek Chapman and I collaborated our efforts to fight against the erasure of Black history. In doing so, we would produce a video on YouTube every day in the month of February. But in doing the research, we would come across phenomenal information. I'll never forget the day he called me with extreme excitement saying, "Man, you are not going to believe this." And that's when he began to tell me the story about George Crum. Now, studying Black history for several decades, both Derek and I have become relatively astute anyway in Black history. Therefore, we could immediately identify the bigger picture. Imagine the lineage and the legacy that could have been if George Crum had gotten the benefits of his creation. We see cultural appropriation even today. Well, the music industry itself has a long history of appropriating Black American art forms while the white artists gained greater financial and critical success for sounds developed by Black artists. For example, Elvis Presley. He became the king of rock and roll and received far more fame and wealth than the Black originators of the sound, even though he covered over their music. Another excellent example is rap music, tinted windows, and rims. Rap music emerged in the 1980s and it intensified in the 1990s. Conservative America nearly lost their mind and they said it was bad and labeled it the devil's music. It was echoed that cars that had tinted windows and rims were for thugs. Now, you can't hardly see a commercial without new cars being advertised while our beats are thumping through the speakers. Now cars don't even roll off the assembly line without factory rims and tinted windows. Funny how when Black America did it, it was so bad. But when white America pushed it, it became acceptable. But with that being said, I encourage my grandchildren and anyone in the upcoming generation to take every measure you can to appropriately guard your creativity. Because if you created it, make sure that you're the one that benefits from it. George Speck, better known in history as George Crum, is forever associated with one of America's most ubiquitous snack foods, the potato chip, originally called the Saratoga Chip. This short, appealing origin story, a prickly diner, a spiteful cook, and an accidental creation of a thin, crunchy potato slice has entered popular culture now. But the full story is more complex. Crum's life, his mixed African American and Native American ancestry, his role in making popular a food that will become an enormous industry, and the racial and economic realities of the 19th century America together show how Black and Indigenous entrepreneurs and creators frequently missed out on the long-term financial rewards of their contributions. Today, we're going to trace Crum's life, examine the compelling origin narratives of the potato chip, and explore how racism and segregation limited the ability of people like Crum to capture generational wealth from culinary inventions that made others rich beyond measure. George Speck was born on July 15, 1824 in Saratoga County, New York. He was the son of Abraham Speck and Diana Toll and grew up in the Saratoga Springs area. Family and local accounts identify him as a mixed ancestry, African American and St. Regis Mohawk, a background that shaped both his identity and his social position in antebellum and post-Civil War New York. As a young man, he worked as a hunter, guide, and cook in the Adirondacks and Saratoga region, gaining a reputation for skill with game and hearty regional cooking. He adopted the surname Crum professionally, a name reportedly used by his father, and became a well-known local figure in the mid-19th century Saratoga resort community. This was a place where wealthy seasonal visitors from New York City and elsewhere summoned and expected high-end service and novelty in dining. The combination of local reputation and access to affluent customers created the conditions in which a specialty dish could quickly spread in popularity. The most famous version of the potato chip story takes place at an event at Moon's Lake House, a fashionable resort restaurant on Saratoga Lake in the 1850s. The story tells of a difficult diner identified as Cornelius Vanderbilt, who complained that the restaurant's fried potatoes were too thick and soggy. The cook, told variously to be George Crum or his sister Catherine, sliced potatoes paper thin, fried them up until crisp, salted them heavily, and served them, either in spite or to please the diner. Well, the new snack became an instant hit. That tale appeared in national press and popular retellings over decades and helped cement Crum's association with the potato chip. However, historians and food researchers caution that thinly fried potato chip recipes predate Crum and Moon's Lake House, yet multiple people connected with Saratoga, including cooks at Moon's and other local establishments, and Crum's sister Catherine, have been credited in various accounts. Food historians argue the popular story likely mixes publicity, local pride, and folklore. But here's what we know for certain. Crum and his restaurant did play a central role in making popular what became known as Saratoga chips. Whether he was the sole inventor or one of several inventors, his contribution is undeniable. Hello everyone. My friend Kevin Long is teaming up with Mr. Robert Thompson for the Kingdom Boom AI Summit. Stop guessing with AI. In just 1 week, you can get the clarity and tools to use it with confidence. The summit is October the 21st through the 26th. See the link in the description below for more information. Now, back to the video. After his time working for Cook for others, George Crum ran his own eating houses in the Saratoga area. Accounts place him at Montgomery Inn and later operating his own restaurant in Malta. These businesses catered to tourists and locals and did well enough to make Crum a recognized culinary figure in the region. The success of such establishments demonstrate his skill as a restaurant entrepreneur and the commercial reach available to a well-placed cook in the resort town. But it also highlights the limits of what was possible for a person of mixed African American and Native American descent in the 19th century America. Crum's restaurant sold Saratoga chips to guests, and Moon's Lake House and other establishments eventually began packaging and marketing the chips more broadly in paper cones and boxes. Still, Crum was never allowed to patent the process or leverage large-scale manufacturing because of who, or should I say, what he was. Over time, other entrepreneurs, factories, and later corporate snack companies industrialized chip production and built brands that captured national markets. While Crum served chips to wealthy resort guests, white businessmen were building the infrastructure to turn his creation into an empire. If you're starting to understand how a system was designed to keep black innovators poor while white businessmen got rich, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell because these mechanisms are still being attempted today. Now, to understand why Crum and many like him did not accumulate generational wealth from the invention that spawned a multi-billion-dollar industry, we must examine the legal, economic, and social barriers facing blacks and indigenous people in the 19th and 20th centuries. Banking, credit, and investment networks were overwhelmingly controlled by white elites. Entrepreneurs of color had great difficulty accessing the capital needed to scale production, buy equipment, or build distribution networks. Without outside capital or inclusion in white business networks, a local restaurant entrepreneur could popularize a dish but could not industrialize it. At the time, food items were rarely patented, but when commercial recipes or food manufacturing techniques were turned into packaged goods, better connected entrepreneurs and companies, often white, were positioned to mass produce and market them. The social devaluation of blacks and indigenous labor and contributions made it easier for others to appropriate cultural and culinary creations without recompense to the originators. Even in states like New York, black and indigenous people faced de facto segregation, discrimination in business licensing, the exclusion from many municipal and commercial opportunities. These constraints limited the legal and institutional tools available for protecting and expanding a business beyond the local scale. Over time, origin stories that resonated with the white audiences were promoted in the press. Local folklore, selective obituaries, and later marketing campaigns emphasized, simplified, or romanticized founder myths that did not always credit the real creators, particularly if they were people of color. That loss of narrative ownership has economic consequences because brand origins and their stories often translates into trademark names, reputational capital, and marketing value. Taken together, these factors help explain why George Crum, who popularized a food that would become a staple of the packaged snack industries, did not become the beneficiary of the multi-generational wealth that later accrued by manufacturers and brand owners. The wider systemic exclusion of people like Crum represents a broader pattern in which creative and technical contributions by marginalized individuals were commercialized by others who had capital, legal access, and social power. It is impossible to provide a precise dollar estimate of the wealth that George Crum might have accumulated had he been able to secure and capitalize on exclusive rights, patents, and mass production channels for the potato chip in the early 19th and 20th century. However, the subsequent trajectory of the snack industry gives us devastating context. By the 20th century, packaged potato chips became a mass market consumer product. Companies that entered the space early and later multinational food corporations captured enormous profits through scaling, branding, and distribution. When an originator does not participate in capitalization through ownership, patents, or equity, the economic value of the creation shifts to the parties who control manufacturing and marketing. for families and communities. Lack of business ownership translates into the loss of intergenerational wealth. No reinvestable capital, no business equity to pass to descendants, and fewer opportunities to build educational and property assets that compound across generations. Viewed in that light, Crum's case is emblematic of how systematic exclusion converts cultural and culinary innovation into profit for others, while denying the originator and their descendants the compounding economic benefits that led to stable generational wealth. Even without a precise figure, the qualitative impact, lost business equity, and exclusion from a lucrative national industry is significant and reflective of a broader structural inequality. In the 20th and 21st century, historians, local museums, and regional tourist organizations have worked to preserve and reassess the story of George Crum and the Saratoga Chips. Local histories, museum exhibits, and contemporary articles have acknowledged Crum's role in developing the popular snack. Modern retellings often stressed his mixed heritage and the broader social context in which a Black and Native American cook's contribution could be turned into mass commercial profit for others. These reassessments are part of a larger effort to correct omissions and to credit a historically marginalized creator. There are contemporary practical efforts that aim to address historical inequalities in similar domains, from supporting minority-owned food businesses to creating grant programs and incubators that help founders of color scale food products. While these efforts do not change the past, they illustrate structural remedies that could have made a difference in someone like George Crum's position. George Crum occupies a place in American culinary history. Whether he personally invented the first thin fried potato, or whether that origin should be shared with his sister or other Saratoga cooks, his restaurants and cooking played a key role in making the Saratoga Chip a recognized delicacy. The story of Crum also highlights a painful truth. Inventors and innovators from marginalized communities often lack, by design, the legal, financial, and social resources to transform a popular idea into lasting wealth. George Crum created something that became a billion-dollar industry, but his family never saw a fraction of that wealth. While corporations built empires on his innovation, his descendants were left with nothing but a story that most people don't even know. This is the pattern of how America built its wealth. Black people created, white people capitalized, and then they attempted to erase us from the story altogether. Your children and grandchildren need to know that the potato chip they're eating right now exists because of a Black and Native American man named George Crum, whose brilliance was stolen, whose legacy was buried, but whose truth is now unlocked. If this story of Black innovation opened your eyes like it opened mine, I need you to do 4 things for me right now. First, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss these stories of Black brilliance that they try to erase. Second, share this video with your family, your church, and your community. Comment below and tell me what other Black innovations have been stolen or rebranded as white success. Third, join our private Facebook group where we continue these conversations and share resources about protecting Black intellectual property and building generational wealth. The link is in the description below. And fourth, read George Crum and the Saratoga Chip by Galia Taylor and Frank Morrison, a book that tells this story for the next generation. You can find this in our complete Black History book library in the description below. Don't let them steal our stories along with our wealth. Don't let George Crump's brilliance be forgotten while corporations profit from his creation. Subscribe, share, and join the community of truth tellers. I'll see you at the next video where we will uncover another story of Black innovation that built American wealth. Take care.